Hey guys, today's goal, the learner will understand how to use trigonometry with right triangles. Okay, so the big three that you've learned so far are sine, cosine, tangent. Another way to remember that, SOHCAHTOA. Okay, so if we just think about that, it says, let's look at the problem. Remember, SOHCAHTOA is sine equals opposite over hypotenuse. Cosine equals adjacent over hypotenuse. Tangent equals opposite over adjacent. Okay, so first thing we got to do is get the hypotenuse, because the side opposite the 90-degree angle is always the hypotenuse, so we have to get that. So we use a squared plus b squared equals c squared. So 25 equals c squared, so c equals 5. So I now know that's 5. So it says evaluate the 6 trig functions. Okay, so what that means is they want to know what is the tangent of theta. Well, we'll just go in the order of SOHCAHTOA. So they want to know, what does the sine of theta equal, the cosine of theta equal, the tangent of theta equal, and then the cosecant, the secant, and cotangent. Those might be new, but they're not difficult. So find the first three, the SOHCAHTOA, sine. So we're starting here, sine equals opposite over hypotenuse, 3/5. Cosine. Cosine equals adjacent over hypotenuse, 4/5. Tangent is equal to the opposite over the adjacent, 3/4. Now cosecant, if you look at our box, cosecant, the only thing you have to remember is it's the reciprocal of sine. So instead of opposite over hypotenuse, it's hypotenuse over opposite. So just flip it. Flip sine, so it's 5/3. Secant is the reciprocal of cosine, so it's hypotenuse over adjacent. So it would be 5/4. See, sine and cosine are always smaller than 1. Okay? Or less than or equal to 1 and -1. Okay? And then cotangent is the reciprocal of tangent. So tangent is 3/4. So cotangent is 4/3. That's it. Okay? So first thing we got to do is Pythagorean theorem to figure out this one. So here we would say 15 squared plus b squared equals 17 squared. I would get b squared equals 64, so b equals 8. Why am I not doing plus or minus? Because we're finding the length of something. You can't have a negative length. So now find the 6. Sine of theta equals 15 over 17. Okay. Cosine of theta is adjacent over hypotenuse. Tangent, opposite over adjacent. And then cosecant, flip it. So 17 over 15. Secant, 17 over 8. Cotangent, 8 over 15. Okay? So there we go. That's the basic of the 6 trig functions. Now, before we move on, look up here. Another way to think of cosecant is 1 divided by the sine. Another way to think of secant, 1 divided by cosine. Cotangent 1 divided by tangent. See, this is important because your calculators do not have tangent, cotangent, all that in it, okay? All right. So evaluate the 6 trig functions, okay? So we need to find A. So a squared plus 5 squared equals 5 square root 2 squared, okay? So if you solve this, you should get A equals 5, okay? Now, notice how they have the same length. That means this is a special triangle we'll be talking about later, but it's a 45, 45, 90 because their angles are the same, okay? So now, cosine. Well, cosine is adjacent over hypotenuse, 5 divided by 5 square root 2. Well, that equals 1 over the square root of 2, but you can't have the radical in the denominator, remember? So you got to multiply by square root 2 over square root 2, which is square root 2 over 2. So the sine is 5 divided by 5 square root 2. But what does that simplify to? Square root 2 over 2. Tangent. Tangent is 5 over 5. Opposite over adjacent, so it's 1. Opposite over adjacent. Okay? Alright, so secant. Well, secant is the reciprocal of cosine. Well, I'm going to go right here, because I don't want to do before or after I simplify, because that moves things back in the bottom. So if I just do the reciprocal of this, what do I get? Square root 2 over 1. Cosecant is the reciprocal of sine. Well, cosine and sine are equal to each other, so it's also square root 2 over 1. Or you could have just said square root 2 for both of these. Tangent, or cotangent, what's the reciprocal of 1? Well, it's still 1. Okay, so there we go. There's the basic 6 trig functions. Alright, this is what I was talking about. In a right triangle, theta is an acute angle, and cosine equals 7/10. What is the sine? Okay. So draw the right triangle. Pick an angle. Cosine is adjacent over hypotenuse. So go ahead, press pause, find that third side real quick. You should have gotten square root of 51. So what's the sine? Well, sine is opposite over hypotenuse. So the sine of the angle, square root of 51 over 10. Okay? You can't simplify that at all, so we're done. Alright. Right here, for 30-degree angles, 60-degree angles, so these pictures, these are things you just need to know. You need to know the sine of 30 is 1/2. The cosine of 30 is square root 3 over 2. The tangent of 30 is square root 3 over 3. I never memorized these ones because I knew they were reciprocals of these. But you just need to memorize the sine, cosine, and tangent for 30, 45, and 60 degrees. You're not going to be given that. You need to memorize that, okay? All right. So it says, solve triangle ABC using the diagram at the right and the given measurements. So they're going to change for each problem. So problem 5. B is 45. C is 5. So here's the thing. We need to get A and B. Well, what do we know about a 45, 45, 90? They're the same length. Okay? So you can just say A squared plus B squared equals C squared, but we know A is equal to B, so we can change that to A squared plus A squared equals C squared. So you get 2A squared equals 25. So a squared equals 25 over 2 square root. You get a equals 5 divided by the square root of 2, but you got to simplify that. So you get 5 root 2 over 2. That's for A and for B. Okay? Now watch 6. It's going to be a little different here. 6. This time, A is 32 degrees, and B is 10. Well, if I want to find C, I have the adjacent, and C is the hypotenuse. So I say cosine of 32 degrees equals 10 divided by C. So cosine 32. Now, in your calculator, you need to make sure you hit mode, make sure it's highlighted in degrees, not radians, okay? Well, first thing I would do is cross multiply, so I'd get C times the cosine of 32 degrees equals 10. Then divide by, so C is equal to 10 divided by the cosine of 32 degrees. So it would be 11.79. Well, I'm not going to do it, but how could we find A now? Well, we have B and C, so use Pythagorean theorem, find them. Okay? So let's look at 7. Seven, you get that the angle of A is 71 degrees, C is 20. So I'm going to find A first. So that's the opposite and the hypotenuse. So you say the sine of 71 equals A divided by 20. Multiply by 20, so you get 20 times the sine of 71 equals A. So 20 sine 71, you get 18.91. So now you have A and C, you can use Pythagorean theorem to get B. Okay? So let's look at 8. 8. You have B is 60. A is 7. So I'm going to find B. Okay. Tangent of 60 degrees equals B divided by 7. Okay. Okay, well, we know the tangent of 60 because I told you we have to memorize that, so if you need to, look back at the chart. But tangent of 60 is equal to the square root of 3. So B equals B divided by 7, so B is equal to 7 square root 3. So do you see how when I was given the 45 degree and the 60 degree, I have exact answers? That's what's expected. So now you can use Pythagorean theorem to get C. Give me exact answers, okay? When it was 32, 71, those were decimals. Those are okay. All right. All right. I want you guys to read this, figure it out. Bring this problem in completed. All right. This is more of a definition. Okay, so look at this, because this is going to help us for word problems. Angles of sight. If you look at a point above you, such as the top of a building, The angle that your line of sight makes with a line parallel to the ground is called the angle of elevation. So this is you standing on the ground looking up. It's called the angle of elevation. At the top of the building, between a line parallel to the ground and your line of sight is called the angle of depression. So if you're standing on top of the building looking down, that is called the angle of depression. Those two angles always have the same measure because if you remember from geometry, those are alternate interior angles. Okay, so you need to know these for word problems. All right, we'll see you guys tomorrow.